Welcome back, hitchhikers. To briefly recap, there was a man behind Fat Lorenzo's that holds the keys to unlocking our unconscious chakras. Last I heard, he has to stay on the move from the thought police. Despite my best attempts to track him down so I can further my own understanding, he has remained elusive. So, you'll have to settle for my unenlightened commentary. We've talked about how our minds are operating as predictive coding machines. Information is passed up the chain until it eventually gets to the executive prefrontal cortex, which can synthesize new priors and encode them back into areas further down the ladder. We also talked about how split brain studies prove people are not consciously aware of all the prior beliefs they are operating on. These characteristics of the brain, which have largely been proven, are the only thing I will rely on to perform my next trick.
Illusion, Michael. Trick is something a whore does for money.
It may not seem like it, but my fourth major passion after science, cheese, and military history is magic.
There's no such thing.
Although I never learned sleight of hand or card tricks, I'm going to try some magic here, using the model of the brain we established in part 1. I am going to attempt to pull a rabbit out of a hat. The model is the hat, and the rabbit I will pull out of it is all of human behavior. So strap in, this series might get very long. The brain compares data to prior beliefs and raises alarms if the results don't match. When the world does not align with our predictions, it causes discomfort. Once this happens, the brain should either modify its actions or modify its beliefs. However, notice I said should. If the brain keeps receiving information that it doesn't like and it never does anything about it, nor does it update its beliefs, this can result in the mind essentially being stuck in a permanent error message. Every single mental health condition is a different manifestation of a problem in the system. Different error messages correspond to these different conditions that afflict the mind. The big four, anxiety, OCD, PTSD, and depression, can all be attributed to discomfort caused by a mismatch of prior beliefs and lived experience. Most day-to-day mental discomfort is caused by this same system, but it doesn't become a mental health problem unless there is some prior that refuses to update, and therefore causes consistent mental anguish. Allow me to briefly go over some examples to prove this lofty assertion. In the case of depression, this entrenched belief could be about yourself. Perhaps a person feels as if they should have a better job, or a better house, or look a different way.
It's an awful nice tale, Kanga. Much nicer than the rest of me.
If they aren't taking steps towards changing their circumstance, and they still continue to think that way, this is bad. In OCD, a patient may have a permanent error signal being thrown that tells them that their home or their body is dirty. Someone with anxiety may have persistent fear that they will make a mistake or that a situation will go awry, despite having taken proper precautions. This is most likely because they have past experience which entrenched this belief, but it could certainly be because of a natural predisposition. Now, this misalignment of priors to reality is what's causing the discomfort, but that doesn't mean that the only solution to discomfort is just deep contemplation. These conditions often come with physical symptoms that can be treated. Treating the physical can, without a doubt, help a person manage the mental symptoms. Drugs that alter mood may put a person in the frame of mind to alter their prior beliefs or behaviors, but the drug itself does not do this. For example, SSRIs, in theory, boost serotonin and mood in a depressed person. This is definitely proven to help certain people. The danger is that the use of anti-anxiety and SSRI meds has led to a myth that mental health is caused by chemical imbalances in the brain. To this day, there is no evidence that low serotonin causes depression. Serotonin reuptake inhibitors will boost mood and may help you, but low serotonin wasn't the problem. Along the same line of thought, activities like going for a jog can help with depression for all kinds of reasons. It boosts serotonin, it might make you update your beliefs in yourself to be more capable, it might make you feel more aligned with how you think you ought to be living your life. In fact, you could argue that having hobbies, activities, and good social bonds are as effective, if not more effective, than drug treatment or psychotherapy, the latter of the two of which are likely working to get you to have those things in the first place. If you have beliefs that are very well established, it can often be easier to make changes to your actions to make them more aligned with your internal predictions. The problem is that it isn't always apparent what beliefs we even hold. The prefrontal cortex doesn't have access to all the predictions the lower order areas are making. It just gets called in as the cavalry when they are baffled. Because we don't have access to what our internal predictions are, identifying which prior or set of priors is the problem can be tricky. I will use the example of body image to illustrate this. I would say that not being overweight is considered healthy by most people and most medical professionals. So, you would assume that most people have the belief that they should be a healthy weight. Therefore, if you are in shape, you will be happy, and if you are overweight, you won't be, right?
Every word of what you just said was wrong.
Well, no, there are plenty of in-shape people who are unhappy about how they look. Think of the insecure gym bros or the mouth breathers who fill their biceps with synthol. On the flip side, there are plenty of overweight people who are happy with how they look. Although, there are definitely other negative side effects to being overweight. The point is, it's not as if 100% of obese people are depressed. The discomfort only comes when there is a misalignment between how someone thinks they should look and how they actually look. For some people, losing weight and getting in shape will resolve this discomfort. For others, it might not. It is possible for someone to become so convinced that they are overweight that they end up being too thin. In that case, the prior is entrenched enough that no amount of new data will change it. In these cases, the belief may have originated from a physical reality but has now become disconnected from it. But the study of eating disorders is a whole field on its own. People becoming stuck like this isn't the norm. Most people are able to update their priors as they go. Most people who lose weight don't become anorexic. Most people who get plastic surgery don't end up going overboard. But nonetheless, problems occur when the priors don't update with the new information. When this happens, we label it a disorder. This theory of predictive processing is very explanatory, but it is also important to note that it doesn't tell you anything about the symptoms a person experiences. This can explain why someone feels anxious, but it cannot quantitatively explain what it actually feels like to be anxious as a human being. It does not provide any information on the experiential components of the symptoms. For this reason, it's not always as helpful when discussing mental health as you would like it to be for treatment purposes. Oftentimes, people need help managing their lived experience more than they need help explaining it. Okay, so this is a neat chat on mental health, but how can we be sure that these entrenched prior beliefs are the cause of the problem and not an effect? It's a pretty big claim that all the major mental health conditions are actually caused by variations of the same thing. How can we know that I'm not as donkey-brained as Freud was? Before you go shitting yourself in the comments with your own theory of mental health, listen up, Buttercup. There are two main ways I can prove this. Number one, the comorbidity rate of these conditions is extremely high. 60 to 80%, for instance, of people with anxiety also have depression, and vice versa. The second thing we could do is show that one treatment could be effective in treating all the big four conditions. That is the critical role studies on psychedelic drugs have played in our understanding of the brain.
Oh no!
Now, before you call me a shill for Big Mushroom, no, I do not have any skin in this game, nor am I a tie-dye wearing, music festival going, big pharma hating, John Lennon listening, cosmic energy healing, psychonaut. I am about as far from that as you can get. But psychedelic drugs like LSD and psilocybin have without a doubt been proven to treat all four of the conditions I listed. Before I go any further, these studies have all been done in a controlled environment, with controlled doses, in conjunction with a trained psychotherapist experienced in dealing with individuals on psychedelics. If you cannot replicate these conditions, do not take psychedelic substances and expect a good result. With that caveat out of the way, yes, they have been shown to treat anxiety, PTSD, depression, and OCD. I think that most people who are unfamiliar with what these substances are and what they actually do have an extremely culturally skewed interpretation of their effects. There is a widely held association between psychedelics, religious awakenings, alien encounters, and other common delusions. However, It's worth pointing out that these types of experiences all involve radically changing your previous beliefs. The reason it is possible for one substance to address so many issues is because, as discussed, these things are all actually the same issue, just manifesting in different ways. The main way psychedelics are thought to work is by relaxing a person's prior beliefs.
Magic mushrooms. Researchers took 30 MRI scans of the brains of 7 participants before, during, and 3 weeks after a psychedelic trip on psilocybin. They found the brain disconnects from its typical pathways and reconnects to different parts of the brain.
LSD basically makes the brain much more connected. Parts of the brain which haven't been allowed to talk to each other for 30, 40 years.
This is evidenced by fMRI brain scans that show increased neuroplasticity and connection between normally unconnected regions. This brings the brain back into a state similar to a human child. While under the influence, people will look for new context to explain what their senses are feeding them. This can lead people to come to sometimes brilliant, but oftentimes nonsensical conclusions while on these substances. Think about an actual child the first time they tried to come up with ideas about, well, anything. I remember when I first arrived to daycare, bright-eyed and juice-boxed. I made perhaps my first friend. It wasn't long before he mentioned his mom. When he said mom, I thought he meant my mom. It was only at the end of the day when I saw a completely foreign matriarch that I realized everyone had a mom. I needed to expand my definition of the word, and this just about broke me. However, being a kid and having a very smooth and plastic brain, I managed to not shit myself IRL in the comments. Well, I did shit myself, but not because of that. Now, the main danger in having someone reevaluate how they interpret the things around them is that they may actually come to worse conclusions. It is very possible for someone to abandon priors that kept them grounded and rational in favor of basically a conspiracy that fits whatever they are seeing at the moment. This is highly situation dependent, which is why all these studies were done in a controlled environment. It is also why you might hear people telling you about their odd mushroom experiences of being stuck in a time loop or thinking they are the tree meister.
No way. No way. What is this garbage? What is this? Oh, I'm king of the trees. I'm the tree meister.
The sheer volume of nonsense on psychedelic trips has led to a complete write-off of their medical use in certain circles. But in a potentially unsafe environment where someone is thrown to the wolves and recorded by their dick friends as they rant about balloon hands, they are likely to descend into paranoid delusion. However, with the right guidance and context, a person may be able to reevaluate the beliefs they hold which are causing distress. Several states have already approved this treatment for patients with a variety of problems. I could elaborate, but I think it's fine to leave it at that for now. If you want a longer video on the topic, let me know. I don't bring up the studies on psychedelic drugs to advocate for them. I bring them up to show that one substance being used to treat 4 separate things must mean that those things weren't as separate as you once thought. These mental health conditions are really just profiles of symptoms, not explanations of what's causing them. What's causing them is a breakdown of the normal prediction and encoding process of the brain. You will notice when discussing mental health and psychedelics, I did not mention schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is not a mood disorder like the other ones looked at, which is why I did not lump it in with them. In fact, schizophrenia can best be modeled as the opposite problem. This is not a disorder caused by a mismatch in priors. Schizophrenia is the lack of ability of higher order systems in the mind, especially the prefrontal cortex, to form rational priors at all. Afflicted individuals' senses and conscious minds are often unable to rationally interpret the data they are getting. Eventually, all the beliefs that kept someone grounded may be replaced with encoded delusions. This is similar to how psychedelics are operating in the brain, but the effect is permanent. Although I just said that the effects of psychedelics on relaxing priors can be good, this is in small doses and it eventually wears off. A common delusion while under the influence of psychedelics is that the effect will not wear off, which is really a testament to how relaxed these people's beliefs have become, if they have abandoned the thought that drugs eventually wear off and they potentially forgot what they even took. They are now stuck in the matrix of their own mind. Anyway, Other animals can have mood disorders like anxiety, depression, or PTSD, especially if they're stuck in a zoo. This is because all animals with a brain have the basic feedback loops of prediction and error that could get stuck in a permanent error message. The basic unit of function is a predictive circuit. However, no other animal species has been observed to suffer from schizophrenia. This is a uniquely human disease. It would be logical, therefore, to assume that this represents a problem with a cognitive ability that only humans possess. But hang on, if schizophrenia is a breakdown in the ability to put things together rationally, wouldn't that mean that a problem in that system would make someone behave more instinctively, closer to how we see animals operating, which is not what we see in schizophrenia? That would be true if the breakdown was a loss in ability, but this is actually an example of too much of a good thing happening. Other animals can't have a problem with this because they can't do it at all. When looking at the genetic markers for the condition, schizophrenia-linked genes appear only in the area of the genome that changed rapidly during human evolution. This period of rapid change began after humans branched from the chimpanzee common ancestor. The human mind developed a unique ability to put pieces together, then encode those pieces as new information that fits in the hierarchy of the existing. Unfortunately, this came with the downside of people often putting pieces together that don't actually fit.
Now, this sounds absolutely insane, and I'm aware of how this sounds. But if you look into the whole story, along with all the other supporting accounts, then if you are of the same mindset, you could potentially come to the same conclusion.
If you are only adjusting priors through classical and operant conditioning like animals often do, this relies on a fair amount of trial and error. An animal's conditioning can lead them astray, but a dog doesn't sit around and wonder if the other dogs are plotting against him. Dogs can be delusional and think that things are dangerous that aren't, like the mailman or bees. A person, however, can reach delusion not through conditioning, but just through the synthesis of ideas from unrelated information. Much like depression or anxiety, even if you don't have schizophrenia, your brain is still capable of experiencing some of the symptoms occasionally. Healthy brains get sad, anxious, and even delusional from time to time. It is only truly a mental health problem if these things are constant and impacting your life negatively. If you're still confused, I think it's helpful to put this concept on an axis. On one end, brains can either be completely grounded in their training and instincts, or they can operate in a land of delusion and conspiracy. The human brain is the only one in the animal kingdom that registers above a 0 on this grounded to delusional axis. Hence, the very feature that allows us to reach a different level of intelligence also mars us with a new form of mental failure. It is this process of using context to make models of the world and consciously encoding them that separates human beings from the rest of the animal kingdom more than anything else. Just a side note, there is a lot of evidence that autism is essentially the opposite of schizophrenia. There seems to be a negative association between schizophrenia and autistic traits when controlling for social difficulty. Some researchers have interpreted these findings as indicating that autistic and schizotypical traits are both overlapping and diametrically opposed in different aspects, with autistic social difficulties being a shared dimension and disorganized impulsive schizotype behaviors as a dimension that is diametrically opposed. That is, both groups may face significant social hurdles, however, for opposite reasons. In the case of the schizophrenic, they are unable to interpret social cues in non-paranoid ways, while in the case of the autistic, they may be inattuned or disinterested in the social systems to start with. Autistic individuals will often think extremely rigidly and need detailed descriptions of things. They will give very high weight to small errors in a system at risk of missing the bigger picture. So, when listening to someone rant about a topic to you in great detail, perhaps you should think, is this person thinking more autistically or schizophrenically? It is possible to miss the trees for the forest, but you can also miss the forest for the trees. This conscious experience, made up of sensory information, mood, and executive function being exerted down upon lower levels of the brain, isn't necessarily uniquely human. Animals are able to have an experience and make plans. It is the synthesis of ideas and conscious exertion of control over our priors that is unique. That raises the question, though. Why are people able to do that? Why do we seem to have some control over our own thinking and priors? Why do we get schizophrenia? Why are humans just so different from every other animal?
What is this, seahorse captain? What is this, seahorse seashell party? Who didn't invite me? Why didn't I get invited, seahorse seahell? What is this? Get real. I'm in love with seahorses.
The key to this problem is that humans are able to understand that other people have their own emotions, goals, and motivations. Apes can do this somewhat, but to a much more limited degree. The animals attribute only two mental states: goal-seeking and perception. For instance, if a monkey sees food close to its trainer and the trainer happens to be looking to the right, it will attempt to steal food from the left, suggesting that the monkey attributes perception to the trainer as well as the goal of preventing it from taking the food. This model of others that apes form would have co-evolved with the actual mental states of members in their group. An accurate model of others is predictive, useful, and therefore energetically favorable. Similarly, human internal models of others in our group would have co-evolved with the actual cognitive abilities of those group members. Human beings are able to internally model other human beings quite well. This is because anyone who could predict what others would do would have a huge advantage genetically. From this understanding of others also comes an understanding of the self. This is evidenced by social animals being consistently better at self-recognition tests. Solitary animals can rarely recognize themselves. It is natural to be aware of yourself as an entity once you are internally modeling others as individuals with perception, goals, emotions, and ideas. After all, you are just another person that can be modeled within your own mind. Of course, some have wrapped themselves completely around the belief that they are in fact the only person that exists and that everyone else is just an agent of their subconscious. This is called solipsism, common in schizophrenic patients and physicists who think we are all Boltzmann brains. But both these ideas are so niche, unfalsifiable, and honestly just kind of dumb that I won't waste your time talking about them. If you do accept the radical assertion that others have mental states and control over their own goals, this leads to all kinds of unique interactions, one of which is humans teaching others in their group to do things the right way. Chimpanzee mothers do not recognize that their infants lack knowledge. They cannot comprehend, for example, that their children don't know how to crack nuts with rocks. Therefore, they do not teach them. A young ape might learn by seeing something done, but that chimpanzee does not have the concept of knowledge and does not distinguish a knowing individual from an ignorant one. They have a very limited model of others. Perception and intention are the only mental states they can attribute. Human beings, on the other hand, have internal models of others as beings with agency and ability to change their behavior. Not only do people have an interest in teaching others in their group, they will practice learned behaviors on their own. We both perceive others' knowledge and skills as well as our own knowledge and skills. There are a few other animals that have seemingly evolved teaching behaviors: ants, meerkats, some birds, but they don't do it in the same way that a person does. These animals are teaching instinctively encoded priors. They do not have the ability to teach things that they aren't pre-encoded to. The compulsion to practice and teach in human beings is unique, but it is still a natural extension of how any basic string of neurons in any animal operates. We are simply trying to get priors to align with expectations, but in this case it's priors about others' behavior or about our own behavior. Every animal with a brain has chains of neurons that operate like this. The key difference is the application of this expectation-reality feedback loop to others in our own mental states. The other ability that humans have that is unique in mammals is asking questions. When a monkey is participating in a shared task with an adult human, if the human stops helping, the monkey will continue on its own. A 2-year-old child, however, will stop and indicate to the adult that they want help. Human children will naturally seek out help because they understand that others can have knowledge that they don't. In all our years of teaching animals to sign or otherwise communicate, none of them have ever asked a question, despite what some gorilla signers might tell you.
Clearly, Patterson says, something more complex than mimicry is involved in the mental capacities Coco displays.
Shut up! Animals do model and copy behaviors, but in people, ideas spread with an unparalleled degree of intentionality. When a child learns from an adult, they not only learn the behavior, but it is imprinted that that is the right way to do that thing. That is how it ought to be done, and they will encourage others to do so in that same manner as well. Humans don't just have the capability to teach, we do it almost compulsively. Human children come into the world ready to collaborate. This collaboration is notably completely flexible. The societal structure of human beings as well as common cultural practices vary greatly. A cat can teach a kitten how to stalk prey, but a human can teach a human, well, pretty much anything. Culture is not a product of our genetics, but an emergent property of all humans. Competition among people has largely not been decided by physical or genetic differences in the groups, but by cultural practices. This cultural flexibility gives people the ability to adapt on a group level much faster than natural selection could ever account for. Due to the ability to model and predict others' internal states, people can agree on shared chunked codes to embed information. Stories, numbers, language, writing can all be used as a way for multiple humans to preserve knowledge too great for any one person to carry with them. This allows the level of complexity to again compound past what any one mind could process by orders of magnitude. Knowledge and institutions get increasingly complex over time. People can both act as an executive of one system and as a contributing unit to others. It is not always necessary or possible for a leader to have complete understanding of exactly what others in the organization are doing. But for a prefrontal cortex, this isn't all that different from not having a complete understanding of what part of our own mind is doing. I cannot micromanage every part of my own body at the same time, just like a general cannot micromanage every single soldier at one time. We encode information and delegate both internally and socially. Now, up until this point, we have established how your brain works, what can go wrong, and we have looked at why our brain's capabilities result in human society looking so different than anything else in the animal kingdom. Although everything in neuroscience is contentious, I just want to say that shouldn't be surprising given that it's studying literally the most complex thing we have ever discovered. So cut them and me some fucking slack, please. But my hope was not to be divisive, instead to present the information in the most accurate way I could. I have hopefully done this in a way that avoids getting too caught up in the weeds of neurochemicals, maps of the brain, or bullshit prison experiments. Other people have made videos about this. If you know, you know. Don't email me! If you are looking for a more concrete explanation of how this flow of sensory data actually results in your lived conscious experience, this is not really my area of study. I can give you our best description of how things are happening, but I can't give you the reasons why having this experience feels the way it does. The actual explanation of how the structure and function of your brain results in a conscious experience isn't actually one that we have cracked yet in terms of science. We're reasonably close and we have some theories, but in the end, they're just theories. Hence, I have not really given you an experiential explanation. I have gone down the route of giving you more the information that we have on a functional level of what is actually happening. Personally, I think this entire machine is working at an astounding level of effectiveness and efficiency for something that only uses 0.3 kilowatt hours of energy daily. AI currently needs an entire power plant to achieve a fraction of the capability. Although the human brain is miraculous, it doesn't mean that this machine is without problems. The brain operating in this way comes with all kinds of implications. Your executive function is limited and may not be focused on what you are doing. People often believe that they are in control of their actions at all times. This is kind of true, but a more accurate description is that you are in control of some of your actions at any given time. What you are doing is formed by both what you are consciously focused on and the previous priors that you're operating on. Remember, if we can put something on autopilot, we will. These priors are formed from experience and instruction from other humans. While doing a task you have done before, which is most tasks you do in a day, you probably do it more or less the same way that you have done it before. At that moment, you really didn't decide how you did that thing. You were just following priors and monitoring the situation for problems as you do it. We are creatures of habit, unless you consciously focus your executive function on modifying a certain prior. While learning any process, the information is learned and it is embedded that this is the correct way to do that thing. But many things, especially behaviors taught to us as children, don't really come with a reason that we remember. This means that people have often forgotten why they're doing things the way they are in the first place. When confronted with the question of why you did what you did, if the brain has no answer, it will make one up. People will often rationalize why they continue to do things in inefficient or harmful ways. When confronted with a change in routine, the instinct is to justify the behavior with whatever comes to mind at the time. People may follow laws because there are incentives to, but when asked why they are following the law, they will cite moral reasons. We know this cannot always be the case because during times when people don't have the threat of enforcement, crime will go up. People definitely do act due to moral reasoning sometimes, but when asked why we did any particular thing, we will often over-attribute our actions to morality or logic. So, the next time your friend does something, ask them why they did it, and when they give you a reason, call out their bullshit. Actually, don't do this. I found this makes people upset, and they kick me out of the Burger King plate place. Because we don't always know why we do things, if I was simply trying to avoid cognitive discomfort, the easiest way to do that is to never take responsibility for my own actions or emotions. By doing this, I will never have to challenge a prior belief I hold about myself. If I'm unhappy, it's because of the people around me, or because of broader society. If I'm fat, it's because of the food companies. If we go to war, it's because of the corrupt war profiteers. If a natural disaster happens, it's just part of God's plan. If I can't get a job, it's because of immigrants. Just the other day, I heard someone say the words out loud unironically. Dang, man. I have been getting so unlucky. I've been fired from 3 jobs in a row. McDonald's, Subway, and now AutoZone. Ladies and gentlemen, I almost spat out my food. Thinking like this, though, is extremely appealing. It protects your prior beliefs about yourself. When thinking back on your own actions, if everything is out of your control, it prevents you from being upset when you realize your actions don't align with your priors. This isn't to say that things can't be out of a person's control. Difficult or impossible situations exist, but more often than not, thinking like this is used as a mental crutch. The instinct of your brain to just make up explanations of both your own actions and the world around you is a huge problem. In a schizophrenic patient, the explanations are completely delusional, but even healthy minds can struggle with this. The incentive of the mind is to create explanations that fit all the data and aren't going to be wrong in the future. This leads most people to gravitating towards completely unfalsifiable explanations of the world. Explanations of what's happening around them that cannot ever be challenged. I'll stop there for now, but in part 3 we will explore the effect of this incentive for the brain to come to these unfalsifiable conclusions about things that cannot so easily be explained.